another episode. Apologies in advance if this episode will may sound like I'm all over the place because I have so many thoughts on what um, went down this week, and I feel like it's I don't want to say important because I don't think it's important for me to air my thoughts, but I think it's useful for me personally to talk about them. So yeah, like I said, apologies if this is going to sound all over the place because I might be going here and there. Haven't really prepared anything apart from my vague and very you know abstract thoughts for this episode. So just apologies in advance. Where do I start? So two really interesting and catastrophic events occurred this week. I mean, I'm not saying that these were the only two events, but these obviously were the headlines in the news this particular week. One being the catastrophic implosion of the submersive that went to see the remains of the Titanic in the Atlantic Ocean. The other was, immigrants losing life, life, losing their lives in a boat or a ship or container, or whatever you want to call it, right uh, outside of like the port of Greece, the country near the I don't know where it exactly was in terms of location, but it was just off the coast of Greece. That's where they were apparently trying to migrate into. So um, obviously, these two events are not related in a lot of sense, but they're also kind of related. And I'm gonna try and draw some sort of a thread between these two because I feel like there were certain things that really related to one another, despite this being two separate events. Um, so yesterday, I saw a story on Instagram by a a famous influencer out of Pakistan, and he in his own way was trying to articulate his feelings and thoughts about these two events. And some of the things that he said in the story, I respectfully and vehemently disagree with, and I'm messaged him right when I saw those stories to really get that off my chest. But then that reminded me, I think, that I need to really elaborate on because it's very if you reply to an Instagram story, it's very limited. You don't want to write the whole thesis there. So I felt like it's going to be much better if I try and articulate my thoughts here. So what the gentleman was suggesting in the story, as I understood, was a couple of things. One, that um, you know during the course of the week when this whole submersive event was being covered, because it was a developing story, and they were on the search for those five people on board. There was a lot of hate, memes, jokes at the expense of the people who went there. And to that extent, I kind of get it because um, if you really boil it down, you know, if you if you really boil it down, excuse me, if you really boil it down, they were out there for exploration purposes. They were out there to explore something that they haven't seen before. Not all of them, actually, but at least a couple of them. So they were trying to explore and push their boundaries and the human boundaries and do something completely new. The cost, the price tag on it doesn't matter because in our own ways we like to do certain things that are unconventional. Um, so in with that regards, it was actually an exploration, adventurous, quote unquote, mission. So there was a lot of hate. There was a lot of memes, fun made at their expense. The fact that they're going to die and people are like, just making jokes about it. And I'll be honest, some of them I enjoyed. I'm not proud of that, but some of them I did see, and I was like, come on, that's kind of like pushing it. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But so this influencer in Pakistan was commenting on that and saying that this is happening because there's an inherent hate for rich people in Pakistan, and they feel like their insecurities or their lackings or their inabilities are directly related to the fact that these people are rich, and therefore in their insecurities they want to project on these people at their expense. So again, a very sweeping, like a very sweeping argument, very sweeping statement that we, and some of the anecdotal examples that were shared was like, you a bike rider and a car, driver get into an altercation or they hit one another, there's an accident. Everybody else just goes right behind the bike rider because they automatically assume that the guy in the car is some arrogant son of a bitch, and therefore, you know, they must be at fault. Which is true, to be honest, it's true that that does happen, that people assume that's the case. And but I don't think using that as I don't, and to be honest, to him, he didn't use that as the sole argument. I'm sure he must have more, and he was just making an Instagram story, so maybe use that as an anecdotal example. But the argument, I think, he did still use that as one of the arguments. So I would assume that this was probably one of his top three arguments, I would say, if not the top argument. And I found that really, like I said, very generic and very simplistic, because the hate for the poor, oh, sorry, the hate for the rich from the poor is the relationship between the rich and the poor is very complicated. It can it I don't think it deserves to be simplified to that extent where you simplify to an extent where you say that it's because they're rich and we're poor, and there's this source of like jealousy or envy between the two income classes. And I don't think that's the case. And my argument to that is that wealth inequality is the biggest reason why I feel like that divide and that hate kind of, if you can't want to call it hate or envy, whatever you want to call it, exists. And um, and that I think it needs a deeper understanding and deeper dive into the situation, instead of just making that sort of a passing statement. And my understanding is that there's a bigger history behind uh, you know the hatred and the envy of the poor towards the rich. And one of the other statements that I'm going to link my explanations with that the gentleman made was that other countries celebrate their rich. We hate on them. We envy them. Although they are job creators. Again, in this particular statement, he's assuming that rich people create jobs, therefore trickle down economics, therefore capitalism, therefore it works, and and we should be thankful. I can address this in a host of ways, but just on the merits of the argument itself, I think if you're using trickle down economics as your main argument to say that the rich should be celebrated and that they're job creators, I think this was like 50, 60 years ago. Maybe that would have been an argument that could have been made. Even then, it might be a stretch. But I mean, more than 100 years of capitalism. I think so we can safely say that there's empirical data to show that it doesn't work. And because one of one of many core reasons why it doesn't work is that you see rise in wealth inequality. You see the top 1% owning more than the bottom 90%, or and you see the tax cuts for the rich, hoping that that would translate into more jobs. And the whole idea of trickle down economics was that the money and the opportunity, or the benefits that the rich get from the government, from a tax position, from a policy position, that's going to trickle down into towards the working class, and therefore going forward, that working class will be able to lift themselves away up from their current position into the next class, and so on and so forth. So that was the argument. That was the original argument for trickle down economics, and on paper it kind of made sense. That's why everybody hopped on the board for capitalism. But we have empirical data that shows that that isn't the case. I mean, wealth inequality is at its highest as is. This is a huge topic of discussion here in the United States in terms of economic well-being. The disparity between the rich and the middle class, or the receding middle class, so to speak. Um, Many of the reasons that suggest that why this is taking place is just, wage stagnation. It's um, um, you know even lack of job creation. I mean, one might argue that the core reason why trickle down economics was put forth with such valor and such enthusiasm was that it was suggesting that it's going to create jobs, and in so many instances it doesn't, because the money that the rich make off of the backs of the working class, some of these big companies indulge in buybacks, or um, they're using that money, instead of making the lives of their workers better, or employees better, they're using that money for something else, or more bonuses, buybacks, because they just want to multiply and keep multiplying that money that they've started to make. So even that argument doesn't really hold true. So this idea of celebrating the rich, again, I'm not suggesting this is not going towards a direction where I start bashing those 5 people on board at the in the submersible that sadly imploded. um, that's not where this is going. But it has to be understood that this is not like a black and white where you say, oh, these guys are making fun of these people because they hate them, or they have this envy for them in their position. No, it's a very simplistic argument to make. I think there's much more depth to that whole relationship dynamic that I think does not get explored, especially in Pakistan, and especially in circles who feel like they are blessed to be in a good position. They don't really dive into that, because I don't know, maybe they're getting too comfortable, in their position, and why not, right? If some, I might argue that I am getting too comfortable in my position, and I don't maybe perhaps spend my days thinking for the underprivileged. So I mean, I'm not who am I to point fingers at anyone, but I'm acknowledging my lacking there. So I guess I can at least say that other people are lacking in that ground too. So this whole idea that this rich bashing thing is steeped in insecurities. I think that's foolish and very naive, to say the least. The other thing that was mentioned in the story, I'm remembering, was about there was a very dark comparison between someone doing something legally versus illegally. Again, going by those two stories, the whole submersive thing was, although a, a colossal waste of money, it's still legal in that regards, that they paid for it, and they didn't like try to cheat their way into seeing Titanic. But although that can't be said for the CEO of the venture, but that's again for another day. And then the people on shore in Greece were trying to cheat their way into this country. Um, Again, I mean, it's it's a very privileged argument to make, and I am in no position to say that I'm not privileged. I am, again, this is not a bashing from a person who is in this illusion that he's not privileged. I am privileged. So, but I'm trying to make an argument. I'm trying to acknowledge my privilege and also say these things. So, just wanted to make sure that is on record when I say this. I think that argument saying that those people in Greece were trying to sneak their way into the country, cheat their way into the country, um, um, is again such a simplistic argument to make, because yeah, on paper that's what it was. But were they trying to get um, in, in spite of wealth inequalities that exists in their countries, particularly in Pakistan? When you have someone who can buy a ticket for $250,000 to go see uh, a, a ship wreckage, you know, and then you have people who sell their houses, sell their properties to just to be on a boat for a chance to be in another country. That something about that equation does not seem right to me. You can spin it any way you want. You can say that people standing outside a restaurant when they see the middle class going in buying food for however much amount they want to buy for, to that beggar standing outside the restaurant, the equation is the same as it is for us when we look at these uber rich people. Um, yeah, I mean, thank you. That's exactly what my argument is. That why is that parity existing in the first place? Why do you have someone standing outside, um, uh, outside the restaurant, hungry, and then you have a bunch of people going in buying food, wasting them, most of them, without any repercussions, that is an unjust environment. That's what I'm pointing towards. You're using that as an argument to say that, oh, it's the same thing. If you think from a poor person's perspective, they're also thinking the same thing that you're thinking. So does that mean that what you did was wrong? Um, Not inherently, but the fact that that situation exists, that is wrong. That inequality exists, that is wrong. Um, if efforts had been made to spread wealth equally, not equally, sorry, let me just take that back, equitably amongst the people, through policies, through um, um, measures to counter income inequality, minimum wage, you know, not having blanket tax cuts for the rich, privileges for the rich. If all of that had been done, and then after that, someone wants to take a deep dive into the ocean, pay a shitload of money to do it, by all means. My argument is, and I have no data to prove this, and because it doesn't exist, to be honest, is that if all of the right things happen, you will not have uber rich people existing. Now, does that mean it's wrong to be uber rich? No, but I think that shouldn't even exist. Not as in like people, but that income bracket cannot exist because that doesn't make sense. The fact that they exist represent a massive inequality in the system, because I don't think someone needs that much to survive, and b, if they utilize it correctly, they wouldn't be billionaires. It's like, one of my episodes that I didn't pass about billionaires, and the whole reason behind why people praise and love billionaires is that, they're there, they made it, so just, stand up and applaud. No, I mean, Yeah, they must have great ideas. I mean, Bezos had a fantastic idea. Musk, Zuckerberg had fantastic ideas, and they cashed it, and they did pretty well for themselves. But do they have to? Do they need to be billionaires or trillionaires? I don't understand. I mean, especially when you have in all of these companies questionable practices, questionable practices to say the least. So it is not ethically or morally upright or upstanding. So the whole idea that you draw this picture to say that these two brackets exists, therefore we should look at them in the same lens at some people would look at us, as being in the middle class or higher middle class, upper middle class, whatever you want to call it, or even lower class. The guy who's homeless would be looking at the guy who's above him in the same way that we were looking at the uber rich. That is, on paper, a fantastic argument, but that's what I'm arguing against. You're making my argument for me, actually. Why is that existing? That means there's something wrong with the system, because that shouldn't happen. Now, I'm not suggesting that everyone will be the same level of wealth. Obviously, the job creator would rank higher than the job, the employee, or the employer is never equal to the employee. But their policies should be in place to ensure that the employee isn't taken advantage of. Also, this whole argument about job creation, I think that I want to address that too. That we love rich people so much because they're job creators. Well, they're rich because people work for them. There is a contractual agreement between an employee and an employer that the employer will pay the employee for their services. So no one's doing any favors here. No one is favoring the. I mean, if the employee walks away, the biggest business will collapse. I mean, that's why most of these rich people don't want unions in their companies. So it's not like they're doing us any favors. They are paying us compensation, which questionably sometimes could be less, or some might even have data to prove that it's not sufficient. But okay, we'll keep that aside. But they're compensated for what they work. So it is a contractual agreement between these two parties. The rich people aren't doing any favors. The job creator isn't doing any favors on the employees or the job workers. So this whole idea that we should cherish and celebrate the rich because they're job creators, what fuck? They're not creating for free. They're not creating because it's in spite of the fact that they don't get any benefits. I mean, we all know factually that when they don't have benefits of creating jobs, they won't create jobs. They create jobs because they find that this is going to add as a multiplier for their own wealth. So they're getting something out of it. So they can't use that as this noble um, 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 action. I don't know. I couldn't find the word, but this novel thing that they're doing, that we should cherish them for it. Again, I I tend to get worked up when I talk about these things. Just to close things down a little bit, I think again I want to reiterate that the 5 people who lost their lives, it was a waste of human lives. Shouldn't have happened. Was greed a part of why that happened on the side of on the part of the CEO of Oceangate? I don't know. One might argue. Did the systematic protection of the rich create an environment where some people can afford to do silly things on an untested vessel? Yeah, I mean, one might argue. So it is a massive waste of life, and wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. As far as the lives lost in the tragic, you know, submersion of that ship vessel in outside of Greece, in the waters. That's also a massive waste of human lives. How can there be, an environment where people are willing to say, take a 50-50 chance on my life? I mean, if there's a 50-50 chance that me leaving my room right now, I'm going to die, I'm probably not going to take that chance. But people are willing to do that. So that's also a question mark on the system, the society that exists wherever they're from. Um, they were not there to fucking, plunder wealth. They were just there to survive. So let's have some empathy for them as well. Um, yeah, I mean that's all I want to say. I think I had one more thing to add to that, but I just slipping my mind right now. But anyway, subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, Amazon Music, Facebook, Samsung, wherever you're listening. Leave us a rating. Makes it easier for other people to explore and discover the show. And yeah, we'll be back with another one. Thank you.